guys, it's Nikki from Still Moments Nursery. I thought I'd take you through how I do my flesh coats using the Real Effects air dry paints. So what I've got is the doll kit that I need to apply a flesh coat to. I've got my Real Effects air dry skin tone. I've got my Real Effects matte varnish, which helps the paint stick to the vinyl. And I've got my distilled water. I've also got a mixing tray. I've got my 1-inch maxi mop, which I apply the paint to the vinyl. Then I've got the Real Effects brush. I'll put a link to this particular brush in the descriptions bar below. But this one I actually use to move the paint around the vinyl. Then I've got another dry 1-inch maxi mop, which I use to just help to dry off the paint while it's drying onto the vinyl. I've got just a little paintbrush that I use to mix my paint. So it's just like a little fan brush. And then I've got a little tiny mop brush just to sort of get into the little creases and any places that I sort of can't get into with these two. I'll apply a couple of coats, or a coat to one of the legs, one of the arms, and the head, just so you can sort of see how I do those three things. So what you're going to need to do first is just fill up your mixing tray with about that much water. So you can sort of just play around. You can add more or less depending on sort of how many doll kits that you have. So just about that much water. And then you want to add your skin tone first. So I'm just going to get a little bit on the tip of this or my mixing brush. You can use any brush, doesn't matter what you mix your paints with. So I'm just going to get about that much on the brush, and then I'm just going to mix that in really well into the water. You want sort of a milky consistency, same as the Genesis heat set paints. So you're sort of wanting it to stick to the palette just a little bit up here. That's how I sort of get my consistency right. So once I've got that to about where I want the thickness or thinness to be, I will then, and always make sure that you put your lids back on your air dry paints, because they are air dry and they will dry out if you don't put your lids back on. The matte lac. Now the matte lac is designed specially for painting reborn dolls. Real Effects have actually designed the paints to actually stick onto the vinyl. They're a really good paint to use. Now with the matte lac, I like to add 2 to sort of 3 brushfuls, about the same amount of what I used for the paint, just to make sure that it sticks. So I'll just mix those in really well. And I'll just add another one. So I'm just going to add in 2 to this one. So again, same amount, and just mix that in thoroughly. And once you're happy with its mix, again, put your lid back on. So once you're happy with your mix, you can sort of just see that it's sticking to the palette. So I'm going to use my 1-inch maxi mop brush. I'm just going to gather quite a lot of that mix, and then I'm just going to brush it off just on the side, just to get the excess off, because you don't want it running all over your work area. And then what I do, I apply the same technique as I do when I'm painting with my Genesis heat set paints. So I'm just going to apply all the paint all over the limb. And you got to remember, it is air dry, so you got to work kind of fast. But with the water, sort of as it's evaporating, you'll see the paint sticking to the vinyl. So as you can see, it's all over the limb. And then I'm going to use my Real Effects pouncing brush, and I'm just going to work the paint until all the water's evaporated. And you can actually see where your paint is sticking, but you just keep doing this and keep moving the limb around, making sure that the paint's sort of not drying in any places that you don't want it to, so like in the toes, so you make sure that you do the toes sort of fairly early. But just sort of work around your creases and your limbs and toes. And you're basically just doing this until all the paint has dried. If your brush gets too wet, you can actually just sort of rub it off onto your paper towel or your work area or whatever you've got set up, and then just keep continuing. And then once you're sort of seeing the paint drops sort of drying, as you can see, there's like little white dots. It's at this stage that I'll swap over my pouncing brush to my more dry maxi mop brush, and then I'll just go over and finish it. And make sure that you get all those paint spots, and you want to just blend them in to the vinyl. And then once it's drying, you should see the difference in the skin tone. And with the toes, because these are quite big, you can't get into those little spots. So I'll just grab my little my little mop brush, and I'll just sort of work the toes and sort of gather all that paint out and even it out, because you don't want like white lines in your creases, because it'll be hard to correct later on. And you want to get under the toes as well. So just work it around and work the paint out of all those creases. And then once you've done that, you can go back again with your dry 1 inch and sort of just finish it off. And then once you're happy with what you've done, you can set it up on just a drying rack, just like one of these. This is just a cup holder that I picked up. And you can simply just sit your limbs just like that until they dry. So I'll do an arm just so you can sort of see how I do the arms. Again, getting the wet maxi mop brush that you filled with paint earlier, and just dry it off a little bit. And again, you're just wanting to just sort of paint all over your limb. And you want sort of a fairly wet mix on it, because if you're applying a thick paint, it's going to sort of dry a lot quicker, and you're not going to be able to work with it as much. So try and sort of have at least half your paint mix full of water, and that way you've sort of got at least a little bit longer to sort of play with it. Then again, my pouncing brush, and I'm just going to pounce and move the paint. Again, you want to get into those little fingers because you don't want the paint to dry on those too quickly. And it's just a matter of moving the paint around until it dries. And if you want it to dry a little bit quicker, you can just sit a little fan sort of off to the side, which will just gently blow air onto you as well, and sort of helps to dry the doll kits a little bit quicker. So again, my brush is getting a little bit too wet, so I'm just going to dry it off just a little bit and then continue working. And then I'm going to go back again with my dry 1 inch maxi mop brush, and I'm just going to work those bigger paint spots out and just sort of blend them in to the paint that's already dried. I'm just working those fingers, all the creases. I'm just going to grab my little mop brush, and I'm just going to take all the paint and blend it in those fingers and creases. And just a final once over with the maxine, just to make sure that it's all blended nicely. And then again, just hang that up to dry. And I'll do the head as well. So again, I'll just gather with the remaining of my mix, because the head is a lot bigger than the limbs obviously. So I'm just going to grab a little bit more paint on the brush, and I normally start sort of with the ear, and I'll work sort of at the back of the head. That way I can sort of see if the paint is too thick and I need to thin it down before I actually apply it to the face. So that's not actually marking or creating any streaks, which is good, so then I can go and paint the rest on the face. And try and get in those in the mouth and the corner of the eyes, because you don't want, you know, any spots that you haven't painted, because it will look funny. Actually get in those ears and behind the ears as well. And once you've done that, grab your pouncing brush again, make sure it's quite dry, and then just work the paint around the same as you did on the limbs. And what I generally find too is this will get filled up with water and paint. If it gets quite, you know, sort of wet, instead of actually wiping it off onto paper towel, you can actually just sort of brush it off onto your palette, and that way you're also saving some paint. And then you're just going to continue working around the whole head. Don't forget the back and the ears. And all these little foam bubbles that you're sort of seeing will actually disappear and you know, dissolve into the vinyl. So you won't see any of those once you've blended it correctly. You don't want to leave it like this, because once they will dry, you'll get like white chalky bits all over your doll. So you want to blend it as much as possible. So now that one, so I've sort of done this one. Now I'm going to move over to my dry 1-inch maxi mop again, and I'm just going to work the paint around and sort of spread it out just a little bit more. And as you're working, you can sort of see it seeping into the vinyl and taking, and which is really good. So the more coats, or the first coat that you will apply, it might not look like it's actually taking the paint, but sort of after 2 or 3 layers you can actually sort of see the build-up of the paint, and you can compare the colour down to the original vinyl here, and that way you know that your paint technique is working. So I'll just dry that off again, just because it's a little bit damp, and then I'll continue working. And I'm going to grab my little mop brush, and I'm just going to work in those eyes, just to blend out the eyes, blend out any paint that's up in the nostril and the side of the nose, because you don't want any build up in the side of the nose there. I'm just going to take out the paint from the mouth and blend that out, because the mouth is obviously going to be a little bit pink, so you don't want any white spots in the mouth. And behind the ears. And then again, I'm just going to take my dry mop brush and just blend out any spots that you see. And then once you're happy that you've got no paint spots or anything on the doll, so no white bits in the ears, no white spots in the mouth, and it's a nice even skin tone. And then you want to just pop that up to dry, just like that. And then I'll generally leave that for, you can apply another coat in sort of 10 minutes time. If you're going to apply another coat just like the flesh coat, I'll probably leave it 3 days just to make sure that that coat sticks, and then you can apply another wet coat. But if you've applied a couple of flesh coats and you want to apply a mottling, you can apply your mottling because it's not as wet as the flesh coats, so it's not going to make your flesh coats run or blend with the mottling. But yeah guys, that's how I do my Real Effects air dry paints, flesh coats, and how I mix them and apply them to the kits. So I hope you thought it was interesting. If you've got any questions, let me know in the comments bar below and I'll be happy to answer them. But thanks guys for watching, and I will talk to you guys soon. Bye!